now. So welcome everyone to this Edge webinar with Bruce Reyes Chow. So glad to be here today and so glad to be joined by you, Bruce. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Good to be here.
So Bruce lives in San Francisco and he is a pastor in the Presbyterian Church in the USA. And in 2008, he was elected moderator of the 218th General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church. Nowadays, he earns his keep in a variety of ways. He has a list on his fabulous website, which says that he is a fifth-time pastor and chaplain, fifth-time preacher and speaker, fifth consultant and coach, fifth blogger and author, and two-fifths stay-at-home dad. And the note underneath says, "You see the problem here." So in addition to all of these things, thank you for taking the time to be with us today, Bruce. And Bruce has written two books, one of which is the definitive-ish guide for using social media in the church. And this will inform his time with us today. So welcome, Bruce. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Great, thanks. It's great to be with you all. Welcome to my kitchen. Those of you that are here early, we're doing a little mini remodel, so there's lots of piles outside of view of this camera. So it is good to be with you from here. I love the way we can kind of connect and join across bounds through technology. So we're going to dive right in, and let me just tell you right off, if any of you recognize this picture here, this is from the Lucille Ball show a long time ago, where they were at this conveyor belt and trying to organize chocolates, and it got too much, and so they just started stuffing them in and all over, and it kind of got overwhelming. That's kind of what this hour could be like for folks. So again, this is going to be recorded, and you can go back and take a look. I would rather have you get more information than you can handle and be able to go back and look at it than to have you yearning for more because you didn't get enough. So just, that's kind of my perspective. You can jump in with questions, and we'll take some time in the midst of that. But all right, so here we go. Let me tell you what we're going to do. I like the imagery of an airplane where you kind of are way up in the sky and you're kind of at this high level. We're going to start there because I think part of understanding digital ministry and technology and social media is around why it's got here and what are some of the things that are going on that's brought it here. And then we'll look at some of what's the stuff going on. And then I'll give you 10 platforms that you can start with in your church, just things that I think are very helpful across the board. And then I'll give you 10 things you can do today. Like when you get off this, you can go and start these things. And you will be able to find these slides and other slides. This is a very condensed version of some longer kind of 8-hour things that I do. So you can look back at a few other events that I've been at, and you can see some expanded versions of what I'm talking about, as well as the slideshow I'll upload to SlideShare, and I'll have this link at the end as well. All right, so here we go. Let me tell you a few things how we begin with all of this stuff. This is a shirt that I walked out with one time of my room, and my then 15-year-old daughter tweeted out, "Dad is wearing a shirt with a symbol of unknown origin." Some of you at an age, you know what this is, others do not. I put it on my Facebook page and said, if you know what this is, tell me how old you are and whether you know it or not. And it was about 30-ish or so knew what it was, above, and under had no idea. And if I was in a room with you all, I'd ask you how many of you know what it is, and some of you would have no idea. Others of you will recognize it in a minute. But it's, if you remember records, actual records that really my kids only know as art projects at this point in their life, but they had the 45s with those small ones. You had to put this spider in the middle of it so you could put it on your record player. Now, some of you remember that, others do not. And the reason you don't remember it is because it went away. This is not a technology that got smaller, that got better. It just disappeared. I share this at the beginning because I think in our culture today, we so much want to be up with what's happening next and what's new, especially church folks who are eager to kind of be relevant and kind of just be ahead of the game. And that's a good posture to have in many things, but when it comes to technology, you're going to miss stuff. I always tell folks when I go talk with church folks, your job is not to be up on the next technological thing. Now, some of you may be early adopters and love all that, but really your ultimate job is to kind of shepherd people who God has called you to be with. And that's going to take many forms, many manifestations, but most of those places you are not supposed to be the digital expert. You get to play with folks like me, who we get to go, I go and play with stuff and then try to help you figure out what this is. So basically the idea is be easy on yourself. You're going to miss stuff. We're all going to miss stuff. And again, it is not your job as a church person, as a church leader, to be up on all the technological advances in the world. Second thing is this. You will not break the internet. You can break your stuff, but you are not going to break the internet. Unless you are some kind of super hack that has disguised themselves as a pastor or a church worker or something, you're going to be fine. So I encourage people, just jump in a little bit. I know sometimes some of these things can feel a little daunting. We can't let fear take over us. We can be wise, but just go ahead and dive in, because odds are you are not going to break anything. The government is probably not going to come knocking on your door for you playing with Facebook. The most important thing for us as we begin is this, that this is a woman who ran her first marathon at 86 years old. And so many of us have many years still, and we can still run a marathon. I'm not going to do that, but many of you could try that. But at 93, she finished the Honolulu Marathon, which is kind of amazing. And I always think about this in light of the text for Abraham and Sarah, when God tells Abraham and Sarah that at an old age, they're going to have a child. After they've been faithful for so long and they've done so much, God says to them, yeah, I'm still not done with you. And so I think when it comes to technology or anything new, or any of these things that are coming at the church or emerging from the innards of the church, and those of us that are kind of tasked with trying to figure out faithful ways to engage and stand against or embrace these things, we have to, I think, first wrap ourselves in this idea that God's not done with us, and that so it doesn't matter about age or perspective or anything, that God's going to continue to move with us. And there's a little word left on there that says God is not done with. There's supposed to be an us on that, but so just know that God is not done with us. Okay, so I want to make some assumptions before we dive into the next part of this, just to kind of how I approach social media in general. That it is only a medium of communication, nothing more, nothing less. We give it too much power. We give it far too much weight these days, and so it's just another medium of communication. It does give insight into a generational worldview, but it's not about absolute. So what we know just from numbers and anecdote is that young people are not all doing the same thing. My 18-year-old daughter, almost 18-year-old daughter, when she turned 13, the best gift we ever gave her was to start on Facebook at 13. When she got onto Facebook at 13, my oldest rule-following daughter, she was shocked at how many of her friends lied to get on Facebook. Fast forward to my next daughter, when she turned 13 this past year, she said to us, "Do I have to get on Facebook?" And I'm like, "Yes, because your family's there now, right?" And so she gets on Facebook, and there's one kid of her friend circle that's on Facebook, and they didn't even lie. They had already turned 13. So part of all this stuff, we want to say young people do this, young people do that. That's not the case. And so just as like it's not old people can or can't do something, we're in a world now that's much more broad and much more niche-based. But it does give, and I'll talk about in a minute, an insight into some worldview and some perspectives about how people interact and engage. But it doesn't the absolutes of generationalism we need to really stay away from. All right, demands a high sense of self-worth, which means that if you believe that folks should listen to you just because you have reverend or doctor in front of your name, this is going to be really hard. Social media is going to be really hard because nobody cares ultimately that you have these titles and these offices. I held the title of moderator of the PCUSA, which is the highest elected office of at that point, 2 million member denomination. There are many, many people who could care less about that. Even part of the denomination would be on social media kind of ranting about things, knowing that I'm seeing that. Now, a generation ago, we would have never done that, for good or bad. And I think part of my stretch was always have to be not to respond with, "Don't you know who I am?" Not to have this kind of puffed up sense of self, but to engage and get my authority from the interactions that I had. So you need to have a high sense of self-worth. flattens the decision-making process. I'll show you some platforms in a minute. That part of what social media and all this digital ministry stuff does is it allows more people to be engaged in the discernment process. And so you have to embrace that. If you want to be a person that says just decrees things and everybody does it, social media is going to be really hard. And then it will not save anything. We want somewhere in the back of our head, we want to say, we're saying if we just build a better Facebook page, then young people will come to the church. Now, that is just not the way that it works. That certainly having a good, solid Facebook page is helpful to integrating young folks in some ways, or having a Vine or an Instagram or those kinds of things, but it is not kind of this return on investment that we would like it to be. So try to keep that part away from thinking. All right, so we talk about some shifts.
Oh, Bruce, can I just jump in for 1 sec? We have a few folks who are saying that you're coming across a bit fuzzy in their hearing you.
Okay.
And we're wondering if it might be your mic.
Mic. Let me switch out real quick, okay? Just a minute.
Okay.
How's that? Is that better?
Yes, but you'll need to turn up your volume now a bit because we turned it down earlier. I can hear you, but really quiet. That is quite the mic.
So I do an in-home radio show. All right, we're getting serious now.
Oh, there. That sounds good. How is that for folks?
How's that? Do I need to turn my mic up?
Yeah,
maybe just a little bit.
Bruce, that would be great.
Okay. All right. Just a minute. How's that?
Even a little bit more would be okay.
A little bit more? All right. Okay, how about that?
Brilliant, thanks.
Brilliant.
That
Okay.
sounds great.
All right.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right. Okay. I'm going to keep going. Here we go. All right. So we're going to talk about shifts. And I think one of the things we'll do here is there are lots of things that have changed in the culture, but everybody's going to have a lot of different things. These are not kind of all-encompassing, but just a few culture shifts that we've seen that have been part of the social media kind of upsurge. One of them is this, moving from bounded to centered set. And some of you have done, if you have done any kind of organizational thinking or study, you've seen this before, this idea that we have this very rigid set of in and out, that we're moving to more fluid kind of relational kind of interaction. So we've moved from a bounded kind of, here's an in and out circle that's rigid and people can't come in and out of that. And that bound is defined by belief or institution, to a centered set where it's a much more concentrated, centered understanding of something, and then folks are connected in a variety of ways, and those connections are much more fluid, and the bounds are much more porous. So that's one. Gone from monolithic to niche, from one assumed obvious choice to many more. This comes out of some study that a gentleman by the name of Chris Anderson did called the long tail effect. If you look at this chart here on the left, you see the blue line says that what Chris Anderson did was he looked at music and how it was sold back in the 60s and 70s. And what he saw was on that blue line that all the money was made in that top 20%, that it was the big acts, kind of the superstars. And then by the end of that tail, it got down to zero, that there was music produced that nobody ever heard. And so that was the way that it used to be. And what he did is he looked at now internet sales, and look, that's the red line, which meant that there was still quite a bit of sales in that top 20% there, but that tail never hit zero, meaning that folks could upload any kind of music and somebody would download it. Now, we can judge people for what they listen to, but what he was pushing people was to look at the tail, and that much more of the sales and marketing should be done in that tail. For those of us in the church world, we've kind of said this is what's happening in church life, right? This kind of mega church movement is clearly coming to an end, and many more of these mid-tail kind of communities, a niche kind of thing, a variety of manifestations of the church are beginning to emerge. These kind of simple church and house church and embedded communities, along with small churches that are reclaiming identity, that's where church growth is going to be. And what we're seeing is that social media is plugged right into that. You can be involved now, not just in, you don't have to give everything to one particular place. You can be involved in many, many things. All right. From single source authority to open source discernment. Some of you may have grown up with Encyclopedia Britannicas in your house. I know I had them, as well as the yearbooks and a lot of that. Now, the simple way to think about this single source to open discernment is this. The difference between Encyclopedia Britannica and, say, Wikipedia. Encyclopedia Britannica, when I was in first grade, I'd look up aardvark. Well, I'd look it up, and then I could take that same encyclopedia today and look up aardvark, and nothing ever changed. It was a static, set amount of information written by a certain number of people that were picked. It wasn't a lot of folks. But Wikipedia, what that is, you look at aardvark 2 years ago, it's different today because more people are engaged in trying to get closer and closer to what aardvarks really mean and what they are, and new discoveries and all that. And so encyclopedia, the single source authority, is stagnant, it's stayed, it doesn't change, to open source discernment, which is like Wikipedia, which is constantly moving and evolving. And it has its goods and its bads, but part of that is it's getting closer and closer to what is probably the truth about any one issue or thing. All right, geographic stability to transients. Many of us know that it's not just young people that are moving around now. That I don't know if it's the same in Canada with your systems, but I know in the U.S. we're seeing people around 55 begin to move quite a bit in the U.S. and to move around to these retirement communities that aren't like retirement homes of yore, but they are these at 55. You move into 55 and up communities, and these kind of pods of people who are in a certain age range, and they're moving all over the place. Social media has allowed that and kind of given people permission to move around more and stay connected. Kind of like when we used to do pen pals, and when I was in elementary school, we would write to a school in Japan, and there'd be one letter written out and then maybe one return, but that was it. Now you can move away and be connected with people, and almost like you didn't move away. And the last thing just to think about is that social media and technology is integrated in a way far more than it ever was before. We may like it or not like it, but the reality of this idea of what many are calling digital natives, this is reality. That, as I look at my kids, I have an 11, 13, and 17. I kind of have this laboratory of technology users in my house. And so to watch them and how they integrate differently, but in some commonalities around how technology is integrated in their life, in their school, and in not just around the social media and networking stuff, but just how they use it in their day-to-day is definitely changed. All right. So let me get to some pitfalls. You want to do some questions?
There's one question here, which I think we'll just jump in with quickly. So Heather is saying, I noticed there is less critical analysis on open source, as if anyone is able to put thoughts out there. Is this a trend, and how do you see church working with this?
Right. So, I think there's a variety of ways of open source. It really comes from software designers. Open source really started because you'd have somebody, let's say, working at Google, getting paid a lot of money, but they have this great idea. We want to figure out how to do X thing. What they would do is they'd put something together, and they would give it out for free. And the cost of using it, and they call it beta, right? That's where this all comes from. And the cost of that would be somebody would use it and then send back, here's what doesn't quite work. Can you work on it again? Until there's this rotating kind of, here's version number 2.97, and it would come back and forth. And so it was this communal back and forth that was kind of controlled somewhat by an initial source. And so there are very few places that actually has no kind of worldview or meta-narrative surrounding it. And so part of a good open source community is that there are checks and balances to it because, so Wikipedia, for instance, if you go to any article that's disputed, it'll say at the very top, there are disputed facts in this article because they know. Now, a vast majority of the articles, if somebody puts something crazy, so people mess with my Wikipedia article all the time. I encourage, go and mess with it, add stuff to it, and what happens is people who have edited it before and are stale editors, which I don't even know who those people are, they get a little ping that says somebody put something on Bruce Reyes' Chow page. They go back into it and try to suss out whether it's true or not. And so there was a time I was working on a project and somebody started to put what a heretic and all this kind of stuff, which are judgment things. Now, I may be, but there's nothing that has been written, studied, published that says that I am whatever they were saying I was. So that's not supposed to be on there. So people go back in and kind of suss that out a little bit. So good open source kind of communities, there is intrinsically some kind of policing, in a positive way and accountability that's set in. So when it's in the church, I think that you set ground rules ahead of time. You're basically allowing people within some kind of bound, right? That centered set to interact around something, and so it certainly can get a little crazy. But I think it's a far better alternative to kind of exploring where God's leading to let folks interact and in that than to kind of say, no, there's a rigid set of bounds around it. All right. Cool? You want to keep going?
Awesome. Leanne has a question about shifting perspectives from community to being who's in the pews on Sunday mornings to community being broader now with online community and what that means for nurturing spiritual communities.
I think it's both and. I'm one that I believe it's important to go to church. Now, people, I think whatever that means for you, there's something about the discipline of interrupting some rhythms in life to go be in community with people that you wouldn't otherwise be in community with around a common table. We go to a church that has communion every Sunday, which I just adore. And so part of that is we get up and go, and does all five members of us every Sunday, can we justify going somewhere else and being in community with a soccer team or at the cafe or me sitting somewhere outside? Yes, we could certainly do that every time. But at a certain level, I think it's a both and, that we need to understand this movement of back and forth between, I think there's something about gathering in space together, whether that's pews or dinner, church, or whatever kind of things are coming up, but to come to a place where it's unapologetically, this is a Christian-centered table, and we are here. That also can manifest itself in being involved with other community manifestations, whether it's small groups or a beer pub or whatever it's going to be. So I think it's both and it doesn't always have to be kind of some kind of that the tension doesn't always have to be so separate. The other piece around that is I think there are people who genuinely online community is more healthy than in person. I am not one that draws this distinction between in real life and online in a way that they are mutually exclusive. I think they enhance each other because I know that there are communities because of physical limitation or sexuality issues or geography and you're isolated, that you are never going to meet some of the people that you find community with online. You're never going to meet them face to face, but they feed you and they nurture your soul. As well as I think this whole face to face online debate assumes that our face to face interactions are always positive. And I simply know from being in church too long that Sunday morning does not mean positive interaction. So there's lots of things going on. There's the face-to-face thing. I think you can do both. They interact and they enhance each other, but also that it's important, I think, for me to go somewhere to be church together. And that could be online or it could be in person, but to disrupt my natural inclinations to go other places, I think it's important to kind of have that discipline. Cool?
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. We are totally going to run out of time, which is okay. So I'm just going to zip through some of these. What happened? Okay. There's some pitfalls in there that I'll just show you there. There's a lot of them over there. I talked about that over and above face-to-face. I do want to lift up two. One is the echo chamber. I think one of the things that can often happen, especially on somewhere like Twitter or Facebook, where you basically get to define the community in which you kind of interact, which I think is good overall, is that we have to be careful that we don't use it as an echo chamber for our own narcissism and our own agendas. Meaning that when something bad happens in my life and I put it out on Facebook or Twitter, everything from maybe a death of a friend to just having a crappy day, there's support and encouragement. And I think that's a really healthy, good thing. But it can turn bad when I manipulate that into wanting it to prove something about myself. So, for instance, I get back from a church meeting and I say, gosh, that meeting sucked. The elders were horrible. They didn't like my idea. There are a lot of people in your circles that are just going to go, yeah, they do, right? They're going to agree with you. There are very few in those spaces that are going to say publicly, you know, how do you think you participated in creating this conflict, right? They're not going to engage you and challenge you in that way. And so we just have to be careful how we use this echo chamber that we build. I think overall it's positive, but it can be a pitfall. The last one on that list, I do think that, in the United States, we've seen a rise in teenage suicides over the last decade, and many, many attribute it to the way that social media can be used. I am not one that lives based on fear, but I do know, watching my children, that when I was young and I had a bully, I came home and it was over for the day, right? I would go back to school and it would start up again, whatever it was, and I'd have to figure it out, and I'd have that break in between. We know now that young people and adults and all of us, something happens, we know that we can turn off all of our technology, but stuff is still going on. And so if there is no other reason to learn this stuff and engage in it well, it's so that we can help our young folks and even our adults, right, when we're getting bullied or we're doing the bullying, to figure out how to use this stuff well and to figure out how to give people the tools and the perspectives to not let the technology enhance the conflicts that are going on. So I think that is definitely a pitfall. All right, but there are many possibilities. Um, Builds up the body. I'll just lift up a couple of these again. I think that one of the things the church, for many of us that have been in kind of these long-standing institutions, we are not always the most creative people in the world. I think we bring a lot to the table, but one of the things that social media and technology does is it liberates creativity and creation. I think it's one of those places that we need to unlock, that the way that folks are using some of this stuff may seem difficult and far-fetched for many of us that didn't grow up with it. But, the way that my kids and their friends, they create Vine videos or they create Instagram stuff, I'm like, how did you do that? And then they just show me, right? I mean, it's pretty amazing. It would take me an hour to learn it, and then maybe I could do it, but it's just somewhat comes natural. So I think there's ways that we can use this to liberate some creativity. I think the last two are most important for me, that social media allows us to model a different way of interacting. So when people mess with me, I'm involved with a movement right now around this kind of misogynistic dating coach person that's out there. We're trying to kind of shut down his operations. It's called Take Down Julian Blanc. And part of what folks have been coming at me and some of us with some pretty negative interaction. I mean, I blocked a bunch of people now, but is people, my friends who are not connected to this at all, see somebody come at me with some pretty nasty stuff. The way I interact models, fair or not, how they see a Christian do that, a church person, a leader. And so, again, fair or not, I have to think about that as I model the way I interact in times of conflict and tension. The church, as you do that as an institution, you get to do the same. If we return evil for evil, then we are participating in the game that society wants us to. If we respond with graciousness, if we respond, now I'm not talking about weakness or being nice, but if we respond in a way that models a way to work through conflict better, then that's this gift that social media gives us. Because when we do that, it goes beyond just the people that we are directly connected with. Other people see it. And the last one there is it compels us to move beyond our own bubbles, meaning that if you follow me on Twitter, you are going to get more than you ever bargained for. You are not just getting church tech stuff. You're going to get things about the Oakland A's baseball club that I love. You're going to get stuff about my kids. You're going to get things about race. You're going to get things about parenting. And so it forces you and me, when we connect, to see things that we wouldn't normally see, right? If I follow somebody in North Carolina, I'm going to hear more about North Carolina politics than I would have ever done that. That wasn't the reason I followed him. It was because of this. But part of what social media does is it connects us beyond our bubbles. All right. I'm going to keep going. I just want to throw up some. some smarty pants terms. These are things that for a lot of folks. My dad is notorious for kind of throwing words together. You've seen it a lot where people just say words because they've heard them, but they don't necessarily know what they mean. I was in a meeting one time when we were interviewing people on Skype, and somebody said, "Oh, I have my son has a Skype machine," and we all went, "What's a Skype machine?" But she knew that it was like something where she's supposed to. It was very sweet and very cute, and we laughed about it. But part of what happens with this technology is that some of us will know this stuff, and then we use words to either feel smart or to make some just background. I think you're we like to number was actually not the I will different and 2 1. Like, but that's not in this case. Uh, Web 1.0 is one-way interaction, right? All they were was you went to web coming at you. It was just want this information. 2.0 is the thing that we got going on. Facebook and all. It's interactive. Take the churches make. When churches should be one. Most people, when they go to your website, they don't connect with you. They want to know how should I dress, what I do with my kid. Maybe if we're lucky, they'll click on So they but for the most part, it's in fact motor church do just church. I will Twitter. Icon their website. I and ask them worship. It may say website, but if you put a Twitter icon on asking, they're better be at today, because what happens is we basically lie to people. Here's what we think you like, but this is not who we really are. It may even be who you hope to be, but it's not who you are. Church people are notorious for putting websites out that are what we hope to be like, not what we really are. And so part of that is this Web 1.0, 2.0 thing to make them not interactive unless you really are a technologically interactive community. But make them 1.0. Be who you are, tell them who you are, and folks will come. And if you told them who you are and they still show up, the first message you said to them is, we told you the truth. If they show up and it's not doesn't match that website, the first thing you told them is, we just lied to you. And so I think that is a huge piece that all websites need to take a look at. All right, I'm going to keep moving here because I have lots of stuff to do. Okay, so a couple other things on there. Just want to debunk a couple of things. Or not debunk, but just give you a little knowledge about. So a little orange thing on the side feed piece. Um, that store is really simple, and what that is is if you click on that, it's going to take you to something that says to to the content that comes from that website or that blog. And all that means is that that's the way for you to make sure that information comes to your email or comes to a reader, but um, all, all that is the way that you can subscribe to the content of whatever site you're on. So that's just it's very very basic. The other thing is this thing on the right hand side called the QR code. All that is quick read code. It's kind of like a barcode on steroids. When you look at barcodes before, they would take you to a place or something. Well, this what uh, as as the on Main Street. So they're everywhere, right? You go to a restaurant, you walk all over. All those are they will take you to something else. So the phone number, a picture, general, a website. So for it, how it would work is you go to a museum and there's a barcode next to the little placard. Um, click on that, and it'll take you to a website about that artist, about that piece, to give you much more, and they can fit on a five card. These are very easy to make. You can do them on Google. Um, there's lots of free there. Pay to have these made. There are a lot of paid services. Always check if you have one made on a free service, check it out and use it, because some of them will often go through a third-party website first before it gets to where you want it to land. Those don't last because we'll stop using them, but just check, and this goes for anything. If you ever do anything free online, make sure it works before you start sending it out to your mailing list. So those are a few more things. But two are the ones that are most important are these things. Oh, it's just called tagging, and then I'll talk about hashtags. This is our dog. I have a very unhealthy relationship with our label maker. I think it's actually right here. Yeah, it's right here. I'll show you here. Props. There's my label maker. I label everything in my house because I have control issues. So here's my tags for everything that I have. I know it's crazy. Anyway, my kids were giving me a hard time about it because I had just labeled towel clips in our house so that we knew whose towels were each one, which I think is brilliant. But they were giving me a hard time, so they came home one day and I labeled my dog. So that's our dog. She doesn't wear that all the time, and she really does love me, so we'll do anything I want. But all that is tagging is connecting a picture, a statement, an update to a particular person. Generally, what that means is you put that little @ sign there in front of any words it's going to connect it to whoever has that name on that site. So if my Twitter handle is Chow, which it is, you see that on the screen. If you put that anywhere on Twitter, I'm going to see it, right? If you just put Chow without the @ sign, I'm not going to see it because it didn't turn into a link. It didn't connect to me. So if you ever want to connect to somebody, you got to know what their username is on that site. So on Twitter or on Instagram or on Pinterest. Now on Facebook, when you do that you can put the name in. Sometimes you can just start typing a name in and Facebook begins to connect it. But that's the same kind of idea. It tags it to that update. You can do it to pictures. You can do it to a lot of different things. But that's how you connect people to a particular thing. Now, one little thing to remember, only tag to connect people. Don't tag to notify, meaning that if you have a picture of a piece of cake that you ate, which I love seeing what people eat. I love that part. Don't tag me so that I see it, please, because when folks look at on Facebook, for instance, and they look at pictures of me, it's going to look like I'm that cake, which some days I might look like that cake, but in that case, I was not that. What you want to do is say in the comment section, put, hey, Bruce Reyes Chow and all your friends, look what I did, right? That's the way to do it. But don't tag pictures unless the person's actually in it, because on their profile, it'll show them as pictures of them, right? So hopefully that makes sense. That's just an etiquette thing that drives me nuts, so please stop doing that if you do that. All right. Hashtags. Let me flip back. There you go. Hashtags. Some of us used to know hashtags as number signs, and then they got all crazy and they started calling them hashtags, and they do the little sign if you kind of look that. There, do that to your kids and they'll think you're totally dorky, but that's what you do. So a hashtag, all that does is words that follow a hashtag, it turns that whole thing into a link. It's only letters, so no punctuation and all that kind of stuff. And what it does is it connects updates of people that use that hashtag. So for instance, hashtag UCCan, right? That hashtag, the more we use it, the more, if you click on that, it's going to connect people. So if any of you are on Twitter now, click on UCCcan, and you're going to see tweets from me and other people who have used it, whether you are following me or not, or those other people, and that connects us in that way. So a lot of events use that. So GA221, that's our General Assembly. If you were to click on that, especially during that time, you would see everybody using those links. It connects passions, like if any of you are scandal watchers or you are a fantasy football. In the U.S., we do a lot of fantasy stuff. Like you could click on those. So those are very kind of, they're not these movement kind of things, but those are just things. If you want to find out who's interested in this, you can click on a hashtag. Or there's these movements. So if you've been keeping up with what's happening here around Ferguson, Not Your Asian Sidekick is not known. There's lots of these kind of movements that if you want to know what's happening around a certain issue or topic or event that's going on, especially around politics or social movements, those are the hashtags you begin to look at. But hashtags are also used in another way where it's commentary on what was just said. And this is kind of a strange thing. So, for instance, I'm a big baseball fan. My team was knocked out of baseball. And so when they were knocked out of the playoffs, I hashtagged it, baseball is dead to me, because I'm not watching baseball anymore. Right? That is not a hashtag that a lot of people are using. It's more commentary on what I just said. So that's a little bit more of a nuanced way. I'm going to need to keep moving on here. All right. So here's some postures to use. I'll just lift up two of them. The first one is be wise, be cautious, but be wise, but don't be fearful. I just think, yes, bad things can happen because of social media and the way that people use it, but 95% of your interactions are all going to be positive, and they're going to be ways for you to interact with people. So don't be stupid. Don't be like, if you are in a deserted area, don't put, I'm here alone, standing, and, da-da-da. Text somebody that's not, don't put it out on social media and all that unless you think somebody's close by. Those kinds of things. So just, be careful about that. Be NPR, so National Public Radio here in the States. When you're sharing things online, especially for church institutions, don't make it all about you. What I encourage churches to do is to do about 4 or 5 things that are not about the church. but are things that their members and people are connected to them will be interested in. And so you're earning their respect. So 6 stories, 5 about things that we're interested in. So kind of we are running out of time. So, oh gosh. Filters that I use around media. Uh, when you're beginning to look at this, uh, technology and platforms, they all provide different services and different things. So when you look at this slide, when you can look up close because it's kind of small, I look at sites that do connections. So those are networking and kind of things. I look at coordination. There are social media sites out there that help us be more productive with our time and how we coordinate our time and interactions with each other. Creativity, kind of how do you use artistry. Curation is how do you share information that people are interested in that you think will enhance their connections with you. Communication, so those are delivery mechanisms that I look at, and then contemplation, how are social media is helping with our spiritual disciplines and practices. There are always the big ones that are out there, but I'm going to give you 10 in about 7 minutes here. Facebook, okay, these are 10 that if you had to start with. Now, some of you who are way into this is not a big deal for you, but these are kind of this is my starter pack for churches. Facebook, as much as young people are not there as they used to be, that doesn't mean it's not still important to use. If you think 5 years ago in any room that you've been in at a church and you said, how many of you are on Facebook? The number of people that would raise their hand would be significantly less. You ask that question today. And if you just think about how that's progressed, your people are on Facebook now.
Awesome.
Now, not all
Um, Heather, a few minutes back was wondering, she said, I get that it's a social media and technology is good, but she was wondering does it make us buy into consumption, and are we tempted to leave behind non
No one ever expected to have as many friends on Facebook as we have now. You didn't expect to have 400 friends. Uh, and so now you need to create lists of your church people so that you can click on that list and, and be able to just scan through what's going on in the life of your community and hit like every once in a while on something. You'd be amazed. We know liking does not take a lot of effort. You're not going to pull muscle hitting like, but you would be amazed for people to know that their pastor or their church person